They laughed when she submitted the blueprints. A building inspired by a Bahay Kubo. In Italy, one senior architect actually said, "This is not architecture. This is a kindergarten project." They rejected her proposal in less than 5 minutes. But 6 months later, when a magnitude 6.8 earthquake tore through central Italy, every award-winning building in the district crumbled to dust except one. The one they had mocked. The one designed by a Filipino architect who learned her craft not in Rome, but in the typhoon-battered villages of Samar. Her name was Isabella Bell Santiago, and this is how she proved the world wrong. Let's start from the beginning. Bell grew up in a coastal town in eastern Samar, where typhoons visited more reliably than relatives. Every year, concrete houses cracked. Metal roofs flew away like angry birds. But the old Bahay Kubo, the traditional nipa huts built by Alolo and the village elders, would sway and bend and somehow remain standing. While modern homes needed expensive repairs, the Bahay Kubo just needed some fresh palm leaves and a few prayers. As a child, Bell would ask Alolo, "Why don't the old houses break?" He would smile and point to the bamboo frame. "Because, Oppo, they do not fight the wind. They dance with it. Rigid things break. Flexible things survive." That lesson stayed with her through high school, through architecture school at a state university in Manila, through years of working on generic shopping malls and condo towers that looked like everyone else's, but deep inside. Bell carried a dream. What if modern buildings could learn from the Bahay Kubo? What if strength wasn't about being the hardest, but about being the smartest? At 31, she won a competitive scholarship to study sustainable architecture in Milan, Italy. It was a dream come true. She packed her portfolio, said goodbye to her parents, and flew to Europe with a head full of hope and a suitcase full of sketches. Milan was breathtaking. Ancient cathedrals, Renaissance facades, sleek glass towers standing beside centuries-old stone. But Bell also noticed something else: pride. Italian architects spoke of their heritage like it was untouchable. Everything had to follow classical proportions, European standards, tested methods. Innovation was welcome as long as it looked and felt Italian. During her first semester, her professor assigned a major project: design a low-cost, earthquake-resistant community center for a rural town in central Italy prone to seismic activity. It had to be beautiful, functional, affordable, and capable of withstanding a major quake. Bell's classmates immediately pulled references from brutalism, modernism, neo-Gothic revival. They proposed steel frames, reinforced concrete, deep foundations, expensive dampers. Bell proposed something different, something no one expected. She designed a structure inspired by the Bahay Kubo. Lightweight bamboo composite frames, flexible joints that allowed controlled movement. Elevated foundations to reduce direct ground shock transfer. Sloped, multi-layered roof designed to distribute weight and wind pressure efficiently. She even included community spaces modeled after open-air sari-sari stores and barangay halls where people naturally gathered. Her blueprints were meticulous. She included material sourcing, cost breakdowns, seismic simulations, and case studies from the Philippines showing how indigenous architecture survived disasters that destroyed modern buildings. She titled her project, Bayanihan Resilience Center Learning from Filipino Vernacular Design, Presentation Day Hive, one by one. Her classmates presented polished, sleek designs full of European confidence. Then it was Bell's turn. She clicked to her first slide, a photo of a Bahay Kubo standing intact beside a collapsed concrete house after Typhoon Haiyan. This, she began in careful English, is not primitive. This is genius. She walked them through her design. How the bamboo composites were stronger than steel by weight. How flexibility reduced catastrophic failure. How affordability meant the community could actually build and maintain it themselves. The room was silent. Not the good kind. The awkward kind. A professor, a renowned architect named Dr. Marcello Rossini, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. When she finished, he did not clap. He sighed, "Miss Santiago." He said slowly, "This is Italy, not the Philippines. We do not build with sticks and grass. What you have presented is charming folklore, but it is not serious architecture. Earthquake engineering requires precision, not guesswork from villagers." Another professor chimed in, "Bamboo. In Europe, it rots. It attracts pests. It is unreliable." A classmate whispered loud enough for others to hear, "She thinks we're going to live in huts now." Belle felt her face flush. "With respect, sir, the materials I proposed are treated and tested. The flexibility I'm describing is based on physics, not folklore. If you review my simulations, Doctor..." Rossini waved his hand dismissively. "I've seen your simulations. They're theoretical. In the real world, buildings that bend too much collapse. That is why we use rigid systems. That is why we have standards." He glanced at her sketches one more time, then back at her. "I suggest you reconsider your approach if you want to graduate. This is not architecture. This is a third world solution for a first world problem." The words hit like a slap. Third world solution. Belle wanted to argue, to show him the research, the data, the centuries of survival embedded in every Bahay Kubo joint. But she saw it in his eyes. He had already decided. To him, she was just a scholarship student from a country that couldn't build real buildings. She gathered her papers and left the room in silence. That night, alone in her tiny studio apartment, Belle cried. Not from sadness, but from frustration. She had worked so hard, believed so much, and in one presentation, she had been reduced to a joke. But as she wiped her tears, she remembered her Lolo's words. Flexible things survive. She wasn't going to break. She was going to bend and then bounce back stronger. Belle decided to do something bold. Instead of changing her design to please her professors, she submitted it to an international sustainable architecture competition. It was a long shot. Thousands of entries. But she had nothing left to lose. Months passed. She barely scraped by in her other classes, where professors treated her ideas with polite indifference. She avoided Dr. Rossini's lectures. She felt invisible. Then one morning, an email arrived. Subject line, "Congratulations, honorable mention. Bayanihan Resilience Center had won third place in the competition. The judges praised it as an innovative blend of indigenous wisdom and modern engineering and a model for affordable, community-centered disaster resilience." The news spread quietly through her university. A few classmates congratulated her. Most ignored it. Dr. Rossini said nothing, but someone else noticed. A small non-profit organization working in rural Italy reached out. They had read about her design and were intrigued. The town of Monte Costro, a village in central Italy with frequent seismic activity and limited funding, wanted to build a new community center. They couldn't afford the expensive proposals from big firms. Could she adapt her design for them? Belle almost cried again, but this time from relief. "Yes," she wrote back. "I'll do it. Over the next 6 months, Bell worked with local builders, engineers, and the Monte Costro community. She adapted bamboo composites to European climate conditions using treated, certified materials sourced sustainably. She trained locals to assemble the flexible joint system. She showed them how the elevated foundation and lattice frame distributed forces during ground movement. It wasn't easy. Some builders were skeptical. Some locals whispered, "Why are we building like Filipinos?" But others, especially the elders who remembered past earthquakes, watched closely. They saw how light the materials were, how quickly it went up, how beautiful it looked modern but warm, like something alive. The building took shape. It was elegant. Curved bamboo beams arched like ribs. The roof, layered and sloped, looked almost like folded wings. Inside, the open-plan design encouraged gathering, just like a barangay hall. Outside, community garden plots surrounded it, reinforcing the idea of shared space and mutual care. When it was finished, the town held a small inauguration. Bell stood beside the mayor, who gave a short speech thanking her. A few local journalists took photos. It was modest, quiet. Nothing like the grand unveiling she had once dreamed of. But it was real. And it was standing. Back in Milan, Dr. Rossini heard about the project. He made no comment. Then, 6 months later, at 3:47 in the morning, the earth moved. A magnitude 6.8 earthquake struck central Italy. It was one of the strongest in decades. The ground shook violently for nearly a minute. Buildings swayed, then cracked, then collapsed. Historic stone churches crumbled. Modern apartment blocks pancaked. Steel-reinforced structures buckled under forces they weren't designed to handle. When the shaking stopped, the region was in chaos. Dust filled the air. Sirens wailed. Entire streets were unrecognizable, buried under rubble. In Monte Costro, residents stumbled outside in terror, expecting the worst. But when the dust settled and the sun rose, they saw something impossible. The Bahay Resilience Center was still standing. Not just standing, it was untouched. While award-winning buildings designed by Italy's top firms had crumbled around it, Bell's bamboo-inspired structure stood calm and whole, as if the earthquake had simply passed through it like wind through leaves. Residents ran toward it. Disbelieving, they touched the walls, checked the beams. Everything was intact. Not a crack, not a tilt. One elderly woman fell to her knees and wept. "It saved us." She whispered, the building the experts mocked. "It saved us." The mayor immediately opened the center as an emergency shelter. Over the next days, it became the heart of the town's recovery, housing displaced families, distributing supplies, coordinating rescue efforts, while people argued over why the modern buildings failed. The community center quietly did what it was designed to do: survive and serve. Photos spread fast. News crews arrived. A BBC journalist standing amid the rubble reported, "Behind me, you can see the remains of what was once a state-of-the-art civic hall, built just 5 years ago for millions of euros. And over there, still standing, is a community center built for a fraction of the cost, designed by a Filipino architect using methods inspired by traditional Filipino housing." The story went viral. International media picked it up. Filipino design survives Italian earthquake. Bamboo beats concrete in seismic test. The building everyone mocked is the only one still standing. Back in Milan, Bell's phone exploded with messages, interview requests, apologies, congratulations, Bell. One email stood out. It was from Dr. Marcello Rossini. "Miss Santiago." It began, I owe you an apology. I dismissed your work as folklore. I was wrong. Your building did what ours could not. I have spent my career believing that Western methods were the pinnacle of design. You have shown me that wisdom exists where I refuse to look. If you are willing, I would like to invite you to present your work to our faculty and students. Not as a student this time. As a teacher. Belle stared at the email for a long time. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to let him sit with his mistake. But another part, the part Halolo had nurtured, remembered grace. She replied simply, I accept. But this time, we do it my way. Weeks later, Belle stood in the same lecture hall where she had once been humiliated. But now, the room was packed. Students, faculty, journalists, engineers from across Europe. Dr. Rossini introduced her with visible humility. Today, we are honored to learn from someone who taught us that innovation is not about rejecting tradition, it is about respecting it. Belle clicked to her first slide. The same photo of the Bahay Kubo. But this time, no one laughed. This, she said, is not a relic. This is the future, not because it is Filipino, but because it listens to the earth instead of fighting it. Because it values flexibility over rigidity. Because it was built by people who survived, not people who theorized. She walked them through the principles, the physics of flexible joints, the role of lightweight materials in reducing inertia, the community-centered design that made people invested in the building's care. My Lolo used to say, rigid things break, flexible things survive. I used to think he was talking about bamboo, but he was talking about us, about how we adapt, how we learn, how we survive when the world shakes. She paused, looking directly at the professors who had once dismissed her. You called my design third world. But when the earthquake came, it was your first world buildings that fell. Maybe it's time we stop ranking wisdom by geography and start listening to the people who have been surviving disasters longer than any of us have been alive. The applause was thunderous. Students stood, even Dr. Rossini, humbled, nodded in respect. After the talk, universities across Europe invited her to lecture. Architecture firms offered her positions. Governments asked her to consult on disaster-resilient housing. But Belle made a choice. She returned to the Philippines, opened her own firm, and dedicated her work to designing buildings that honor the wisdom of her ancestors while serving the needs of the present. She called her firm Bahay Collective, and her tagline was simple. We don't build to conquer nature. We build to dance with it. Today, her designs stand in the Philippines, Italy, Japan, and Chile, places where the earth moves and people need shelter that bends but never breaks. And every time someone asks her how she became so successful, she smiles and says, I just listened to my Lolo, and I refuse to let anyone convince me that survival isn't sophisticated. So the next time someone dismisses your idea as too simple, too traditional, or third world, remember Isabella Santiago. Remember that the buildings we mock today might be the only ones standing tomorrow. And remember that sometimes the greatest innovations come not from laboratories, but from the hands of those who learn to survive with grace.